Darkness was slowly swallowing the forest, wrapping the towering trees in what looked like a giant black shroud. The air carried a strange smell, damp earth, rotting leaves, and something else, something impossible for the human mind to identify. Ethan, Emily, Oliver, Chloe, and Liam, 5 university friends from London, stood beside their Land Rover, parked on an old dirt track at the edge of Blackmere Forest. They were all students at a private university and had come looking for adventure. Ethan was the natural leader, tall, athletic, and always chasing the next thrill. Emily, his girlfriend, was beautiful, intelligent, and far more cautious than the others. Oliver was the joker of the group, always ready with a sarcastic comment. Chloe was quiet and bookish, constantly writing notes and documenting everything she saw. Liam, the youngest, was energetic and fearless, always the first to suggest something reckless. "This is the place I found on that old online forum," Liam said excitedly. "Blackmere Forest. People say there's an ancient graveyard hidden in here, and at night." "Oh, stop it, Liam," Emily interrupted. "We're here for one night of camping, and then we're heading home. No ghost stories." Ethan laughed and squeezed her hand. "Relax. It's just an adventure. According to the map, there's a beautiful lake deeper in the forest. We'll set up camp there." They grabbed their backpacks, switched on their torches, and stepped into the forest. At first, it was beautiful. Towering oaks and pines stretched high into the sky. Birds sang overhead, and somewhere in the distance a stream could be heard flowing through the trees. Oliver even set up a small action camera to record their journey. For nearly 2 hours they walked, but the path grew narrower and the trees denser. A strange mist settled around them. "Ethan," Chloe asked, holding up her phone, "why have we completely lost signal?" "It's a forest," Ethan replied, though there was uncertainty in his voice. "That happens." By the time they found the lake, evening had fallen. The water was pitch black, perfectly still, without a single ripple. Large ancient stones surrounded the shore, each carved with strange symbols, circles, crosses, and distorted faces that looked almost human. They pitched their tents and lit a campfire. Oliver entertained everyone with ridiculous stories and impressions while the others laughed. Liam quietly pulled a small bottle of whiskey from his backpack. Around 10 o'clock, the wind suddenly stopped. Silence. Emily frowned and listened carefully. "Can you hear that? It sounds like something moving." "Probably birds," Oliver joked. But it wasn't birds. It was footsteps. Faint, distant, the sound of dry leaves being crushed under something heavy. Ethan picked up his torch and shone it into the darkness beyond the trees. "Nothing. Come on," he said after a moment. "Let's get some sleep. We've got a long walk tomorrow." They climbed into their tents. Liam and Oliver shared one, Ethan and Emily another, while Chloe stayed alone in the smaller tent nearby. At around 2 in the morning, Chloe woke up. Someone was outside her tent. She could hear breathing, slow, deep, heavy breaths. Her hand shook as she unzipped the tent and stepped outside, pointing her torch into the darkness. Nothing. Then she looked toward the lake. Standing at the edge of the water was a tall black figure. It looked human, but impossibly tall, at least 7 feet high. Its head was lowered, and it stood completely still. Chloe tried to scream, but no sound came out. When she shone the torch at it again, the figure was gone. Only small ripples disturbed the surface of the lake, as though something had just slipped beneath the water. She rushed back in her tent, trembling until sunrise. The next morning, Liam was gone. His tent stood open. His backpack was still inside. His boots were neatly placed outside. But Liam had vanished. "Liam!" Ethan shouted into the forest. His voice echoed through the trees, but there was no reply. Oliver tried to laugh it off. Maybe he wandered off for a wee and got lost. But nobody smiled. Emily noticed something strange. The campfire had somehow burned all night, yet the wood looked untouched. The flames seemed almost unnatural. Chloe wanted to tell them what she had seen during the night, but fear tied her tongue. All she could whisper was, I don't think we should stay here." Ethan unfolded the map. "We'll head back the same way we came." The 4 of them started walking. But after an hour, they froze. They had returned to the lake. The tents were still there. The fire was still burning. And one of Liam's boots lay on the shore, soaked with water. Ethan bent down and picked it up, his fingers trembling. Inside the boot was a dried, ancient leaf stained with something dark red that looked disturbingly like blood. "What the hell is this?" Oliver shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "Liam, if this is a joke, it's not funny anymore." Emily grabbed Ethan's arm. "We need to leave. Right now." Chloe stared at the lake. The water was still perfectly calm, but deep beneath the surface, she thought she saw enormous shapes moving slowly through the darkness. Ethan took a deep breath. "We stay together. Nobody goes off alone. Oliver, you stay with Chloe. Emily, you're with me. Keep your torches on." The four of them pushed deeper into the forest. The trees seemed thicker now, their branches brushing against their faces like cold hands trying to stop them. The strange smell had grown stronger, a sickening mix of decay and burnt flesh. "Liam!" Ethan shouted again and again. About half an hour later, Oliver suddenly yelled, "Over here!" They ran to him. Hanging from the trunk of an enormous tree was Liam's backpack. His phone, water bottle, and snacks had spilled onto the ground. The phone screen was cracked, but one last photo remained open. It was blurry, taken at night. Behind a tree stood a tall, hunched black figure, watching whoever had taken the picture. Chloe stared at it in horror. "That's it. That's what I saw." Emily looked at her. "You saw this last night? Why didn't you tell us?" I thought I was dreaming." Suddenly, laughter echoed through the forest. Liam's laughter, but it sounded wrong, distorted, as if something was trying to imitate him. "There!" Ethan shouted, racing toward the sound. The others followed. The forest grew darker, the trees closing around them. Soon there was no visible path at all. Then they reached it, an ancient graveyard. Hundreds of crumbling gravestones stood among the weeds. Strange symbols were carved into many of them, the very same markings they had seen around the lake. Oliver crouched beside one of the graves and brushed away the moss. "There's something written here," he whispered. "Those who enter never return." Emily's face turned pale. "This place is cursed." They turned around to leave, but the path behind them had disappeared. The open trail they had followed was now blocked by a thick wall of thorny bushes and tangled trees, as though the forest itself had sealed them inside. As night fell once again, they made camp in a small clearing near the graveyard. Ethan built the largest fire he could. Chloe opened her notebook and began writing everything down. Her voice shook as she spoke. "This forest isn't normal. It's alive. It's feeding on us." Oliver forced a weak smile. "Well, if there's a ghost out there, maybe I'll teach it how to dance." Nobody laughed. Around midnight, they all heard it, breathing. Close. Slow. Heavy. Something was circling their camp. Ethan grabbed his torch and aimed it at the trees. A figure stood there. Tall. Black. Its head hung low, hiding its face. But its eyes, two glowing red lights, stared back at them from the darkness. "Who's there?" Ethan shouted, stepping forward. The figure vanished. Gone in a single second. I saw it too," Oliver whispered. "That wasn't human." Suddenly Chloe screamed. "My notebook!" It had disappeared. In its place lay an old, torn piece of paper. Written across it in what looked like dried blood were the words, "You belong to us now." Emily broke down in tears. "We're going to die here." Ethan tried to calm everyone. "Stay together. We'll survive the night. At first light, we leave." But morning never came. The sky remained hidden beneath thick gray clouds, and the daylight looked no brighter than dusk. Their watches seemed to have stopped. By what they guessed was midday, Oliver stood up. "I'm out of water. I'll fill my bottle at the lake." "Don't go alone," Emily begged. "It'll only take 5 minutes." He walked away. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then 20. Oliver never returned. Ethan and Emily rushed to the lake. Oliver's backpack was lying on the shore. His boots were there too, but Oliver himself had vanished. Small ripples spread across the black water, and from somewhere deep within the forest came that same horrible laughter. This time it wasn't just Liam's. Oliver's laughter had joined it. Chloe, who had stayed behind at the camp, suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. When Ethan and Emily ran back, her tent was empty. Only her notebook remained. It was lying open on the ground, and written across the page were the words, "It took me. You're next." 5 friends had entered Blackmere Forest. Now only Ethan and Emily remained, and the forest itself seemed to be laughing. Now only Ethan and Emily remained. They stood in the small clearing near the old graveyard, their faces soaked with sweat and fear. The sky was still buried beneath heavy clouds, as though the sun had abandoned Blackmere Forest forever. Emily clung tightly to Ethan's hand, her nails digging into his skin. "Ethan, what if none of this is real?" she whispered. "Liam, Oliver, Chloe, where did they all go?" Ethan's eyes were bloodshot. He looked exhausted, but he was still trying to stay strong, trying to be the leader everyone needed. "This isn't in our heads," he said quietly. "There's something wrong with this forest. We have to get out. Now." They gathered what little they had left, 2 torches, a hunting knife, a few packets of biscuits, and some water. Ethan also picked up Oliver's backpack. He pulled out a compass, but the needle spun wildly, as if some invisible force was controlling it. "It doesn't matter," he muttered. "We'll just head east. The same way we came." They started walking. Every step crushed dead leaves beneath their feet. The trees no longer looked natural. Their branches bent down across the path, and twisted roots seemed to rise from the earth, trying to trip them. The sickening smell of decay grew stronger with every minute. After nearly an hour, they discovered the ruins of an old building hidden among the trees, perhaps an abandoned manor house or an ancient chapel, more than a century old. The walls were cracked, the roof had collapsed, but part of the structure was still standing. "Should we go inside?" Ethan nodded. "Maybe we'll find a clue, or somewhere safe." The moment they stepped inside, a freezing gust of air swept through the ruins. Old newspapers, shattered bottles, and scattered human bones lay across the floor. Ethan swept his torch across the walls. One of them still held an old document from the Victorian era, dated 1890. Written across the yellowed paper were the words, "Blackmere Forest is cursed. The spirits that dwell here are always hungry. Those who enter never return. They devour your mind first, and your body second." Emily's voice trembled as she read it aloud. "So it's true." Then they heard it. Footsteps above them. Laughter. And then screams. Liam's scream. Oliver's scream. Chloe's scream. All at once. "Liam!" Ethan shouted. "Oliver!" There was no answer. Instead, the voices grew louder, closer. The 2 of them ran outside, but the moment they stepped out of the ruins, the landscape had changed. The path they had used to enter was gone. In its place was a deep, dark pit, as though the earth itself had swallowed the exit. Emily broke down. "We're trapped, Ethan. This forest is playing with us." He pulled her into his arms. "I'll get you out of here," he whispered. "I promise." Night fell once again. They built a small fire in one of the safer corners of the old ruin. Exhausted, Emily drifted into an uneasy sleep while Ethan stayed awake, gripping the knife tightly. Around midnight, he heard a whisper close to his ear. "You're Emily? She's beautiful." He spun around. Nobody was there. Then Emily began mumbling in her sleep. "No, don't touch me. Liam, who are you?" Ethan shook her awake. She opened her eyes, confused and terrified. "I saw it," she whispered. "A tall figure, but it had no face of its own. It wore all of our faces. It changes them. It walks around wearing them." A cold knot formed in Ethan's stomach. When what passed for morning arrived, they set off again. The forest had become even thicker. Strange shapes covered the bark of the trees, faces carved into the wood. Some of them looked disturbingly familiar. Some looked like Liam. Some looked like Oliver. Some looked like Chloe. Suddenly, Emily stopped. "Ethan, look." Ahead of them was another clearing. Written across the ground in what looked like blood were the words, "You are next." Around the message lay 3 pairs of abandoned boots. Liam's. Oliver's. Chloe's. Emily screamed and started running. Ethan chased after her. They ran through the forest as branches tore at their clothes and scratched their faces. Behind them came the sound of footsteps, heavy, fast, and getting closer. Then they stopped. The black lake stood before them once again. But now the water was dark crimson, like liquid blood. In the middle of the lake stood 3 figures. Liam, Oliver, Chloe. But their faces were horribly twisted. Their eyes were gone, leaving only empty shadows. Their mouths hung open as though they were screaming, yet no sound came out. Then a voice echoed across the water. "Help us, Ethan." It was Liam's voice. Emily let go of Ethan's hand and took a step forward. "Liam, you're alive." "Emily, don't," Ethan shouted. But it was too late. She ran toward the lake. The moment she stepped into the water, her footing slipped. She stumbled forward. Ethan lunged to grab her. Then a hand burst out from beneath the surface. It was long, cold, wet, inhuman. The arm wrapped around Emily and dragged her violently into the lake. The crimson water exploded into waves. Her scream echoed once across the forest. And then there was silence. Ethan was alone. He collapsed onto the ground, tears streaming down his face. Around him, the forest seemed to laugh. The branches swayed like clapping hands. Night grew darker. Slowly, Ethan stood up. There was a strange emptiness in his eyes now. He walked toward the edge of the lake and looked into the water. His own reflection stared back at him. But behind his reflection stood a tall black figure, resting one long hand gently on his shoulder. A faint smile spread across Ethan's face. "Now," he whispered, "I belong to you too." He remained standing by the shore. The water slowly faded from red back to its unnatural black. Emily's final scream still echoed inside his mind. "Emily," he whispered silently. The forest had gone completely quiet. No wind, no birds, no rustling leaves. Only the sound of his breathing. He turned around. The tents were still there. The fire was still burning. But everything looked wrong. The tents were ripped apart, and the smell of rot drifted out from inside them. The flames burned with an eerie blue-green glow that no ordinary fire should have. Ethan picked up his backpack and began walking into the darkness. He wasn't running anymore. He walked with purpose. Voices filled his head. Liam's voice, Oliver's, Chloe's, Emily's, and another voice, older than all the others. "You were never alone. You never were." He walked for hours, or perhaps only minutes. Time meant nothing here. The trees seemed to guide him, their branches lowering as if pointing the way. Eventually, he reached a vast clearing. At its center stood an ancient stone altar. Around it, arranged in perfect circles, were more than 100 human skulls. In the middle rested a huge black stone covered with strange symbols. Ethan stepped closer. An inscription had been carved into the rock in a mixture of Old English and faded local writing. "This forest belongs to us. We are its guardians. All who enter become part of it. Your souls give us strength. Your fear keeps us alive." A cold wind swept through the clearing. From the empty mouths of the skulls came faint sounds. Laughter, whispers, screams. Ethan stumbled backwards. Visions flooded his mind. He saw all the people who had entered this place before him. Victorian officers, hunters, lost travelers, young couples, explorers. One by one they had been drawn into the darkness. Their forms changed. Eventually, they became it. Then the tall black figure stepped out from the shadows. For the first time, Ethan saw its face. It never stayed the same. One moment it was Liam, then Oliver, then Chloe, then Emily. Finally, it became Ethan himself. "What are you?" he whispered. The answer came from many voices speaking together. "We are what you have forgotten. The fear hidden inside you. The greed. The anger. The loneliness. This forest is only a mirror of your own soul. We do not consume you. You willingly become part of us." Ethan tried to lift the knife, but his body refused to move. His limbs felt heavy. He dropped to his knees. Memories crashed through his mind. He saw Liam wandering away from the camp that first night, tempted by the promise of finding something extraordinary. The figure had called to him, and he had followed willingly. Oliver had never gone to fetch water. He had seen the figure and run in terror, only for it to catch him. Chloe had written everything in her notebook. She understood the truth. But the figure had shown her her deepest desire, endless knowledge and eternal peace, and she had accepted it. And Emily had tried to save him. But the creature had shown her a lie, a vision that Ethan would abandon her and save himself. It had all been a game, a trap built from fear and temptation. Tears rolled down Ethan's face. "Please, let me go. I want to go home." The figure moved closer. Its long hand rested gently against his forehead. The cold reached deep into his bones. "There is no way back," the voices whispered. "You became part of this place the moment you entered." Darkness swallowed his vision. He felt his body changing. His skin grew hard and cold. His eyes burned. Something ancient was waking inside him. Slowly, Ethan stood up. He felt taller, stronger, different. The forest laughed. Ethan, or whatever was left of him, began to walk. Behind him, strange footprints appeared in the earth. Far away, at the edge of Blackmere Forest, new sounds drifted through the trees. The sound of a vehicle stopping, young voices laughing, new adventurers, new victims, and the tall black figure moved silently towards them. Ethan, or whatever remained of Ethan, stood deep within Blackmere Forest. His body had changed. He was taller now, his skin dark and hardened, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural red light. When he spoke, it was no longer in his own voice. Instead, a deep, haunting chorus came from him. A mixture of Liam's laughter, Oliver's joking tone, Chloe's quiet whispers, and Emily's gentle cries. The forest had accepted him. The trees bent as if greeting him. Twisted roots cleared his path. Even the wind seemed to move at his command. Far away, near the edge of the forest, new voices echoed through the trees. 3 young travelers, 1 boy and 2 girls, had just parked their vehicle. They carried backpacks, tents, and the same excitement that Ethan and his friends had once brought with them. "Wow, this place looks amazing," the young man laughed. The reviews online were brilliant. The dark figure that had once been Ethan smiled and slowly began walking towards them. His footsteps made no sound. The leaves beneath his feet did not even rustle. He moved close enough to watch them, but remained hidden among the trees. The newcomers could only hear a faint whisper and a quiet laugh. One of the girls stopped and looked around. "Did you hear that?" The other shrugged. "Probably birds. Come on, the lake should be just ahead." Ethan watched them carefully. The excitement in their eyes, the curiosity, the temptation. He knew exactly how the story would end, because the forest was always hungry, and its hunger never faded. The last memory. Somewhere deep inside Ethan's fading human mind, one final memory remained. He remembered sitting before the ancient stone altar, the moment the dark entity had finally claimed him completely. In that instant, he had seen the truth. Blackmere Forest was no ordinary forest. More than a century ago, during the Victorian era, a cruel landowner had built a hidden graveyard in these woods. Innocent local villagers had been murdered, and their restless spirits had been bound to the land through a terrible curse. The man believed the forest would become the source of his power. But when he died, his own spirit became trapped within the curse he had created. Over time, the forest had become something more than a haunted place. It had become a living thing, a dark presence that fed upon those who entered, feeding on their memories, their fears, and their deepest desires. Everyone who wandered into Blackmere Forest fought their own darkness at first. Then they accepted it, and eventually, they became part of it. Ethan had been the last to resist. He remembered raising the knife and trying to drive it into his own heart. But the tall black figure had only laughed. "You are already dead," it whispered. "The moment you left Emily alone. The moment you pretended you could save Liam. The moment you chose to bring your friends into this place. Your fear, your courage, they all feed us." The knife slipped from Ethan's hand. His body collapsed. And when he stood again, he was no longer the same person. The present, the new group, eventually reached the lake. It was the same lake. The same dark, silent water. But now, lying at the edge of the shore, were 5 pairs of abandoned boots. Some old, some looking as though they had been left there only moments ago. The young man bent down and picked one up. "This looks almost new," he said. "Someone must have left it here." Slowly, the figure stepped out from behind the trees. This time, he did not hide. He stood in full view, tall, dark, and smiling. And on his face was Ethan's smile. "Why have you come here?" he asked softly. His voice sounded perfectly human. The 3 strangers stared at him in surprise. "Who are you?" the young man asked. "Are you camping out here too?" Ethan smiled. "Yes," he answered quietly. "I'm a camper." He took another slow step towards them. "This place is very special. Come with me. I'll show you." One of the girls hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe we should leave." But the other smiled with excitement. "Oh, come on. He's probably a local guide." And so they followed him. The forest welcomed them. Night fell once again. Gentle ripples spread across the black surface of the lake. Beside the 5 old shadowy figures, 3 new shapes slowly appeared within the darkness. Ethan stood at the front of them all. He looked up toward the sky. There were no stars, only endless darkness. Softly, almost kindly, he whispered, "Now you belong to us too." Far beyond the trees, more vehicles could already be heard approaching. More adventurers, more laughter, more stories waiting to begin. Blackmere Forest was hungry, and it would never be satisfied.